Okay, so welcome to Deep Weird Dialogues with me, Dr. Jack Hunter, where I'm talking with contributors to the book Deep Weird about their chapters and some of the ideas that are contained within them. And today I'm really happy to be joined by Dr. Gregory Shushan, who is a researcher of near-death experiences in a historical and cross-cultural context. So,
Thanks, Jack.
Gregory, you're welcome. Your chapter is about unpeeling the many different universal, cultural, and individual layers of near-death experiences. So I wonder whether you could just talk a little bit about how these experiences are sort of multidimensional in a way.
Yeah, it's I think just what you said is a good way to get into it. Basically, there's the universal layer, which is the kind of general thematic structure of a near-death experience. So the context of a person dying, leaving the body, going to another world, usually entering darkness, coming out into a realm of light, maybe meeting a being of light and deceased relatives, and then coming back to the body, either because they're sent back by the being of light for whatever reason, or because they just wake up back in the body or whatever. And then there's the cultural layer, which sort of determines how each of those elements are experienced by the person who's having the NDE, and also how they relate it once they wake up and tell people about it. So, for example, leaving the body, entering darkness, those are fairly universal themes that don't have a lot of layers on them. But then traveling through the darkness in the West is often seen as a tunnel. In other places, it's just seen as rushing through darkness, or in small scale indigenous societies, they actually walk along a road to the other world. Darkness isn't even mentioned. So the important thing about it is the transition from the out of body state immediately after death to the other realm. And then other cultural things are, the identification of the being of light. So, when a Buddhist will see it as the Buddha, a Christian will see it as Jesus, and so on. The reason for the return is often culturally dictated. In the West, it's often that you're sent back because you have something to fulfill in life. You didn't finish your PhD, or you've got a child to look after, or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
which I have.
right, but you finished your PhD, so
Yeah.
um, yeah, and then so in other cultures of it, it's sometimes a case of mistaken identity, where they got the wrong person with the same name, and so you're sent back for that purpose. And then on top of those cultural and universal layers, you've got the individual layer, where it seems like your state of mind impacts the experience. Your personal ideas about the afterlife will impact it. Atheists will just say they saw a being of light, or they saw a figure radiating love or whatever, but they don't ascribe it a particular religious identity. And there are lots and lots of idiosyncrasies in near-death experiences that are clearly from a very individual level. And I think this also helps to explain why some people have negative NDEs, which seem very much like positive ones. They enter darkness, they rush through the darkness, they see this being, but everything's experienced and interpreted in a way that's threatening and dangerous and frightening.
Yeah, so it seems to suggest that there are, like you say, maybe universal features. Do you think that suggests that there is like a particular kind of experience that people have that they then interpret through different cultural frameworks? Or are there actually lots of different kinds of experiences that are interpreted as, NDEs?
Yeah, I think it's well, I think when it's the context of dying, or temporarily almost dying and coming back to life, being seen as clinically dead, or being seen as dead by whatever society you're in, I think it's probably the same kind of experience, but differing in the way that we actually give form and expression to it through our culture and our individuality. So it's almost like we project our symbols onto it in order for it to be experienceable, I guess is maybe the way to put it. So
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I've got one more question. And that's based on sort of the observations of people like Kenneth Ring, researchers, quite pioneering researchers of NDEs in a way. And they've pointed out that there are similarities between some of the phenomenological features of near-death experiences and some of the features of other kinds of extraordinary experiences, like alien abductions, for example, and also in certain psychedelic experiences. So I wonder if you could just, speculate on what the connections might be, if any.
Yeah, it's speculate is definitely the right word. I would say maybe these experiences are triggering similar kinds of states of being, whether that has to do with, that they're genuinely metaphysical states of being, that people are having these experiences independently of their body, with a kind of non-local consciousness, or whether it's just the brain creating similar states of mind because
Mhm.
maybe when the brain is triggered in certain ways with psychedelics or with being close to death or being prodded by an alien or whatever, maybe it just kind of reacts in similar sorts of ways. I mean, alien abduction also has similarities to sleep paralysis, as you know. So there's a lot of crossover with a lot of these experiences, and it is difficult to disentangle them. And I know that like DMT and ketamine and these kinds of drugs are said to mimic NDEs to quite a large extent. Some people who've said they've had both say that they're quite similar. Um, but again, it's does that mean that the drugs are mimicking an actual metaphysical near-death experience state, or does it mean it's causing the same state, or does it mean that both of them are just a neurological state? And I think there's just kind of not enough um, you know, sound definitive evidence either way. It's which is funny because people have been researching this stuff for decades, and they still haven't been able to quite figure out what's going on.
Excellent. So it seems like obviously we're dealing with something that's very complicated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll just say, like, with my work, one of the main, probably the main focus is really that not so much whether near-death experiences are real or true, or the ontological nature of them, but it's more like the way they've impacted religious beliefs and culture in general, sort of throughout the world. And I think once you start looking into it and looking at the evidence, it's quite astonishing because they go back millennia. There's accounts of them everywhere, but they seem to have been just kind of disregarded or not recognized in the history of religions. So it's kind of in a sense, I feel like it's rewriting the history of religions and how we can look at how afterlife beliefs developed and religions themselves to an extent.
That's brilliant. So, if you're interested in finding out more about the many layers of the near death experience, you can check out Gregory's chapter in Deep Weird. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.